What's up, guys? Mike here from Ekim Knives, and first things first, I want to say a huge thank you for 5,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. You guys are awesome. You guys are what made it possible to get this far. If you told me 2 years ago that I would hit 5,000 subscribers, I would have laughed. I would have said, no way, no how. But here we are, guys, 5,000 and still counting and still growing. Thank you so much. Now, this is going to be kind of a longer video because I'm just going to let it roll. I haven't done a Q&A session in a while now. I got a whole bunch of questions, and I know a lot of you guys are dying to get to the tutorial stuff. I'm going to have to do some Q&As a little more often because the questions are piling up, and the channel is growing, which is a great thing. Now, the Q&A series, I'm sorry, not the Q&A series, the tutorial, the How to Build a Frame Lock series, it's been slow progress because I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm also trying to, amongst all this stuff, doing it part-time, get some knives out the door, right, to keep the shop going. So, behind the scenes, and if you follow me on Instagram, I've been posting as I'm going that I've been working on this guy this week. This is my Albatross model, a crazy hawkbill frame lock. I mean, this is a big blade. That's a 4-inch blade. Of course, it's a difficult build, and I'm learning as I'm going, so it's just slow progress. A lot of time behind the scenes working on these guys. And this one still needs a bunch of work, too. So, that series will continue with the frame locks, and this series will also continue. Ideally, I want to do one of each a week. I know I say that now, but I have a hard time getting one video a week out. But we'll see how it goes. I want to try and step it up a bit for you. All right. Jumping into the Q&A, guys. If you have any questions for the next Q&A, put it down below, and this is the first place I check for questions for the next one. I also want to mention before we get started that I started a Facebook page for Ekim Knives, links down below, and the page is simply for the guys that don't do the mobile, on the phone with the Instagram, because Instagram is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, a quick picture, and that's all I put up, and a little bit of interaction. I've been sharing those pictures from Instagram to my Facebook page. So if you don't do Instagram, but you do Facebook, at least you'll see what's going on behind the scenes if you're interested. So links down below if you're interested in that, guys. Not terribly active, like I said, I'm spread pretty thin as it is, but I do post pictures, so at least you can see what's going on. Okay, jumping right in. Gabriel Cairo, how do you choose the thickness of the blade you're going to make? Do you think 1/4-inch stock is too thick for a knife? Because I really like the way they look, but I'm afraid it'll cut poorly. Well, Gabriel, it depends on what kind of knife you're going to make. If we're talking about a huge camp chopper, this is a machete, but imagine this was a 10-inch camp chopper, or some big, thick fighting knife, some 8-inch blade, and you want to make it super tough to chop through wood, or, something crazy, like stab through a car hood or something, then yeah, 1/4-inch stock is going to be the way to go, because you want that strength, that rigidity. But if you're going for something like a chef knife, a 1/4-inch is a terrible idea, because you're not going to get the geometry to cut and slice properly. Now, if we're talking about a generic utility EDC, just a hunting type knife, maybe like a 4-inch bladed knife, 1/4-inch is doable, and I've done it, so I'll give you an idea here. So I got my Interceptor, the Tanto model, and this is the original. That's in 1/8, and that's in 200 thousandths, which is just shy of a 1/4-inch, which gives it a very pretty grind, as you can see. It really accents the grind lines, but I lose a lot in my geometry. So I can sharpen this up and make it crazy sharp, but as far as cutting ability, you're going to lose a little bit. It's just the nature of the beast. So I think maybe if you're doing a generic size, maybe like this big, 3/16 might be a nice compromise for your build. If you're doing a chef or something, stick to 1/8 or less. And if you're making some crazy chopping and you need an axe-like effect, then by all means go thick. I've even seen guys go up to 300 thou, which is crazy thick. So hopefully that helps. Okay, next up, M&M Knives. Who are your knife maker idols? Ooh, that's a tough one. Because I try to get along with everybody in the knife community, and I appreciate each guy for what they have. Now, there are bad apples, and I don't associate with any of them. Just not my kind of personality. Now, speaking of personalities, there are guys out there that I love their personalities. There are guys out there that I love for their production and how many blades they can bang out. It blows my mind, some of these guys, of what they can accomplish in a given amount of time. It blows me away. I like guys for their ingenuity and their creativity. So, and for what they've built, you know, if they've started from nothing. I mean, look at Spyderco. The guy started driving around, and I think it was an old camper he modified into a sharpening wagon, and well, look at him now. The big business. Guys like Greg Medford, the guy puts out, geez, I don't know, a lot of knives, has a big factory, and grew his knife making business into something huge. There are plenty of guys out there that don't like his personality. He's just, you love him or hate him kind of guy. And then there's also guys like Tony Marfione, who also built it into a big business, has some great products, you know, that are very aesthetically pleasing. I don't own any, but I am a fan of his work for sure. And then there's the little guys like me. I'll give you an example. And Frankie, if you're watching this, Tactical Pterodactyl Knife. That guy can, I swear that guy grinds nonstop. I don't think he sleeps. He's doing it on a 2x42, I think still, right, Frankie? If you're here, comment. If he's still doing it on that, he's still cranking out blade after blade after blade after blade. And I sign up for his email list, and he lists 5 blades every week. I can't tell you the last time I made 5 blades in a week. And minimal tooling. I seriously admire his production skills with what he has. Something I lack, and I aspire to be. So hopefully that wasn't too rambly, and nobody in particular, but everybody for bits and pieces of what makes them great. Okay, next up, Alfonso Terrones. How do you break in cork belts? Does every grit require a different way of breaking them in? For instance, how much of compound do you use and what type? Okay, here's a simple thing with cork belts. And I like cork belts a lot. Steve Miller Knives turned me on to them. I break them in with my old work rest that I don't use. It's just a piece of square tube. You can see where it's all shiny from breaking in my cork belts. And I use this, oh, it's filthy, for the rounded corners. So I'll put the cork belt on the grinder on a flat platen, and I'll just push this square tube flat against the belt and just let it run for about 5 minutes. Be careful not to go like this and eat up the corners. You want to get a nice flat piece against there and wear the whole belt down evenly. And I use green compound pretty much exclusively on the cork belts. For 400 grit I use a white compound, but I don't see any major difference, so you should be fine with green. But yeah, run it 5 minutes on this, just jam it into the belt, let it run, and you should be nice and broken in. Okay, John O'Kelly, what's the best metal for edge retention? Well, John, there is no easy answer to that. And anybody that has an answer for you is probably not sure themselves. Now, here's why. It's not just the metal, it's the heat treat properties in the metal. So, for me to test this one piece of steel, which is AEBL, to accurately test it, I would have to get the geometry exactly the same on every knife, and then I would have to do a perfect exact cutting test on every knife for each one of the Rockwell hardness points. So maybe starting from 59 to 60 to 61 to 62, and to see which one holds the edge the best. Do that for every steels, and there's literally hundreds of them, and I could do that for the rest of my life and never get an answer. So just be wary of the guys that tell you which one is the definite best. Now, I know that's probably not what you're asking. What is a good one that most people recommend and has been proven? For that, you're talking about your super steels. So S110V, S90V holds an edge for quite a long time for its heat treating property, its ideal hardness. You got M390. Look at what the guys are using in the cutting competitions, which I believe most of them are using M390 or something similar. Maybe it's M4. All those high-end super steels are great for edge retention. But if you're making them yourself, if you're going to be making these blades and you're just starting out, please do not start with M390 or S110V. It's going to be very frustrating. I'm using CTS XHP right now, and it's a little better than what I've been using, but whew, there's a learning curve to it. There certainly is. So that would be my guess, maybe like a CTS 204P in there as well, to look towards the super steels. But as far as the best, I don't know, and I bet you nobody else does either. Okay, next up we got Brent Boggy. Hey Mike, will you talk about belt progression, i.e. ceramic, micron, etc.? Okay, I typically grind my blades, and I'm assuming you're talking about the grind. And we'll actually use this one as an example. It's a little filthy, but wipe that off of my shirt real quick. So there's the grind. It's a satin finish, still a little dirty. But I start out with a 60 grit belt. I always start out with 60. Some guys go a little more aggressive, like a 50 or 36 even. I start with 60. I like to slow grind. After 60, and that will be ceramic, VSM belt in particular, I'll go to a 120 ceramic VSM as well. After that, I'll go to a 220 Norton ceramic, or a 220 Klingspor J-Flex. Those are those yellow belts you see all the time. Depending on what I want to do with it. But those work, they just don't last very long, the yellow ones. After that, I'll do a 400, either another yellow one, or I'll switch it up and start going to either a Cork belt, or lately I've been into the Norton X series belts. I'll start with I believe it's an X45 is equivalent to a 320 grit, and then after that I'll go to like an X22, which I believe is about a 600 grit. I'm not 100% sure, but it leaves a nice finish. Either that, or I'll go to a 400 to a 600 Cork belt. So I believe this one is a 600 Cork finish, and leaves a very nice smooth satin. After that, if I gotta go any higher than that, I'm typically hand sanding, because I'll be going for a mirror after that. So hopefully that helps. And yeah, I typically stick to the cheap stuff. There's a lot of options in belts, and there's a lot of people like the Trizac Gator belts. I'm not a big fan of them, but try them out. I tried them, found out I didn't like them, so I moved on to something else. My two favorites right now are Cork, and for finishing belts anyway, are Cork and the Norton X series. Okay, Pat Kern, what does heat treating cost? Well, that also depends, but here's a tip if you're going to use the heat treater I use, which is Peter's Heat Treat. If you send him one blade, he's going to charge you for it, because he's got to fire up this big oven and waste all that electricity or whatever he uses to run it, fuel, I don't know. And then he's got to pay specific attention to just one blade. So you're going to pay a premium to do one at a time. Now, if you're going to do 10 at a time, and 10 is his magic number, for just so you know, 10 of the same steel, so he doesn't have to do 3 of this and 3 of that and 3 of this. So do 10 of the same steel, and you'll get charged around $10 to $12 per knife. So figure you're going to spend about $120 plus shipping, and for me lately it's been about a 3-week turnaround. But that includes cryogenic treating if you're using stainless steel, and that includes some straightening, which he does, and I believe they are done in a forge or a vacuum furnace, so you're not going to get these crazy colors and all that stuff. Now, it also works with, if you send him 20, you're still going to pay that same 120, 150 maybe. I think I sent him as much as 40 once, and it costs about $160. So the more you send, the more you save. But be careful with batch work. As a beginner, it has bit me a couple of times before where I got 10 blades back and I made the same mistake on 10 blades and the whole batch is no good. So just be careful when you're starting out. So if you're going to send a batch, just send the 10 and just make it, mark it down that it's going to cost $12 extra per knife for the heat treat, and you have to pass that cost on to the customer, of course. Okay? Alright, next up, Spencer Richardson. If you could only keep one machine in your knife shop, what would it be? That's easy. That would be the grinder, the 2x72. It is by far, this guy back here, by far the most used machine in the entire shop. A lot of the stuff in here is nice to have. After that would be the drill press, because you kind of need a drill press. So those two are probably the most important machines. The milling machine is a nice to have, especially it's a kind of a necessary thing if you're going to do folders. The surface grinder is certainly a nice to have, but definitely not necessary until you really start getting way into folders and stuff. And everything else, nice to have. I mean, I'm assuming you're not counting hand tools, because just about everything we do can be done with hand tools. It's just how much time are you willing to sit there with a file and sand and file and file, and that's basically what we do. The more money you spend, the more time you save. So, to answer the question, the grinder, by far, with all the little attachments and everything, is well worth the money. Okay, Jack Relstab. Hey, I have a question for the FAQ. What do you like the most about knife making, and what do you hate the most about knife making? Okay, this is kind of a tough one, but what I like the most about knife making is making something out of nothing. The ability to say, I took this piece of steel and I turned it into this, a functional piece of art, if you will, that people look at. And when I tell people that don't know knives that, hey, I make knives in my shed and everything, they think I'm sharpening prison shanks on a concrete floor. That's not the case. And when I show them what I can do, they're blown away. They say, wow, that feeling is great to me. And I also like to share my experience with all of you guys, which is also very rewarding in that sense. What do I hate the most about knife making is, at the end of the day, you're getting into manufacturing. So it's a kind of a love-hate relationship with making something out of nothing. But when it comes to the business end and selling your product, making something out of nothing and hand making takes time. So it's horribly inefficient. So I'm super jealous of the people that are starting their business now, and they're a buy and sell type place. So they buy from a manufacturer, they sell to the consumer, and they're just the middle guy, cutting a little bit of profit out of each item they sell. So all they have to do is say, hey, check this out, this is a cool knife, $200, right? And they just bought it for $180, whatever, and they make their $20 profit on it. Super jealous of that. I gotta be the guy that buys the material, makes the knife, and then goes and says, okay, $200. You see where I added a huge step in the middle. So that's a tough one. When it comes to selling, I think that's my the thing I hate the most about it, is because it's just not a quick sell. The biggest problem in hand making knife is productivity. Something I suffer greatly at. Okay, next up, El Caballo Diablo. What compound do you use to buff your 2500 grit finish? So I guess when you're looking for a mirror polish. I use green compound, green chrome specifically, and I use it in a hard, what do they call that, a sisal wheel, the sewn wheels. Use it in that, and then use a clean, soft wheel to buff it clean. And that's it with that. I use pretty much green for everything in here. A lot of guys that are like compound junkies, I guess, or polishing gurus, if you will say, oh no, you have to use the black, and then the green, and then the blue, and then the yellow. I just sand it until I get close enough, and then I buff it with green. Good enough for me. But maybe look into it a bit more, because I'm certainly not in the know when it comes to all the different compounds. I just stick with green and maybe sometimes white for something a little more aggressive. Okay, Antonio Farinas. Hi, I'm a new subscriber and I have a question. Well, thanks for joining us. What is your opinion of XHP steel for a 5-inch blade combat knife? Okay, my opinion for XHP, which is this guy here actually, and that's a 5-inch blade. So, my opinion of this. It eats bandsaw blades for breakfast. This steel is very tough. It also eats drill bits. It's very hard to work with. Now, in terms of machining, it's not so bad. Its rust resistance is okay. It's not the best, but it's certainly not a carbon steel, but it's not a super duper stainless. Like ABL is very, very stainless, and you could get it wet and leave it. If I were to get this wet and leave it overnight, it's probably going to rust a little bit or patina just a tiny bit. Not like a carbon steel like this, where it's going to patina like crazy. So it has its pluses and minuses. Yes, I just looked at my thumb because I kind of poked myself with a giant machete. Other than that, I had to approach it differently with sharpening. My normal methods did not work like I had expected. So I had to really work on that edge. And when you do the sharpening of it, it gets crazy sharp. It's just my sharpening method for AEBL is totally different than my sharpening method for CTS XHP. So just be aware of that as well. It's a learning curve, and I'm still learning, so I don't want to give you a definite. All I know is this steel is super tough, and it's very wear resistant. I haven't done any extensive testing, but I will pretty soon. This blade's actually a screw-up, so I might sharpen this one up and just bead on it to see what this steel can take. Okay. Oh, geez, I don't know what that is. I'm going to try to pronounce this without butchering it to death. Morgoth, Bau? I don't know. It's that one. That guy right there. Okay? I'm not even going to try that one. How much accumulative time would you say you spend sanding a satin finished blade? Depends on the size of the knife and what grit I end up at. So, if I were to hand rub finish a chef knife, I have kind of OCD, so if I see a tiny little scratch, I can't ignore it, and I'll easily spend 4 hours plus doing a chef knife, 100%, 800 grit, or 1200 grit, or 600 grit hand rub satin finish. And I'll start from 120 grit sandpaper, by hand. I'll start my foundation there. For smaller knives, obviously it's a little quicker, and I've finished them pretty well off the grinder before, sorry about that, was my phone. Finished them pretty well off the grinder before at like a 400 grit finish, where I was able to cheat a little bit and go down to maybe a 220, or even start at 400 in some rare cases, and breeze through it in a couple of hours. But typically I'd say between 2 to 5 hours for a hand sand, for a nice hand sand. So, I think that's about average for me. About 2 to 5 hours. Okay, Louis Lavenda. When hand sanding the handle, how do you prevent the volcano effect on pins? Oh, okay, so, I don't have any knives around here with pins in them, do I? I do not. Okay, so, what he's saying is, when you go to hand sand, and you're working on your handle material, oh, here we go. So I got a piece of carbon fiber here, and a brass pin. Okay, see how the pin is sticking up through the hole? When you go to hand sand this, so you're using your hand, and it's got obviously some give in it, or if you're using a rubber block or a slack belt or something like that, the material around the pin is going to go away faster than the pin itself, which means the pin will be raised up a bit, not shot out like that, but raised up a bit. So, I'll show you what I mean. So you'll have, just take my word for it, I lost it. So, the pin will be raised up a bit, causing a little peak, a high spot in the pin. So, here's what you do. you have to use a sanding block or a file to get them level first. So I like to use a sanding block or something hardback, so you can do it on the grinder and grind it flat like that, or just mount it in your vise and grab a sanding block with a hard backing and just sand that pin directly until it's flush with the material underneath it, and get it to a nice fine finish. Because when you go to the finer grits of the sandpaper, you can go back to hand sanding and you won't volcano them so bad. But on the rougher grits, and if you're really looking to hog out material, get the sanding block or use the platen or something with a hard backing to make sure you get those pins nice and flush. Alright, so I think that's about it on this one, guys. I know I'm a little rusty with this, so bear with me. I'll be doing more of this in the future, so if you have any questions, put them down below. Yeah, anything, put it down below. Let's chat. Alright guys, this is Mike here from Ekim Knives, and I'll see you on the next video.